It's a strange kind of pain to see everything too clearly. While most people drift across the surface of life, you keep sinking deeper, feeling every current, noticing every shadow. You don't just think, you see. You sense what others ignore. You feel what others hide. And sometimes that awareness feels like a curse. But what if it isn't? What if your depth, your endless questions, your sleepless mind, your heavy heart is actually your greatest gift? Because maybe the weight you carry is the light the world has forgotten to see. You ever notice how some people move through life untouched? The noise, the chaos, the rush. It all seems to slide off them like rain off glass. But then there are others, the ones who can't help but notice everything. The tremor in someone's voice when they say they're fine. The way light hesitates before leaving a room. The silence between words that was supposed to mean nothing, but somehow means everything. It's a strange kind of pain to see everything too clearly. Most people swim across the surface of life, gliding easily over moments. But you keep sinking. Every thought pulls you deeper. Every question drags you below the current. You try to stop, to just float like everyone else. But your mind keeps reaching, searching, connecting. You see the patterns that others miss, how beauty hides inside sorrow, how joy trembles beside loss. It's not that you want to think so much, it's that you can't not think. There's a quiet ache that comes with that kind of seeing. It's like standing in a room where every light is on. Too bright to rest, too clear to ignore. You catch the faintest shifts in mood, the smallest contradictions in people's eyes. You hear the words they didn't say. You notice the way they said the ones they did. Sometimes it feels like a gift, this sensitivity, like a secret map that lets you understand the hidden language of life. But most days, it feels like carrying too many mirrors. Everywhere you look, you reflect too much. Why can't I stop thinking? You whisper to yourself when night falls and the world finally quiets. But your mind doesn't listen. It keeps turning, circling, remembering. It replays conversations, imagines different outcomes, builds entire worlds from fragments. Even when you try to sleep, it hums beneath the silence. The same way the ocean hums beneath the waves. You long for stillness, but you were born to see movement in everything. There's fatigue in that awareness. To notice is to feel is to carry, and to carry is to tire. You feel the weight of people's pain, even when they hide it. You sense the sadness in laughter, the fear behind ambition, the loneliness tucked inside crowds. You look around and wonder, do others see it too? Or is it just you, cursed with the eyes that won't close? You envy the ones who can turn away, who can move on without thinking twice. But you can't unsee what you see. You can only learn to hold it differently. Sometimes you wish you could forget, to stop dissecting the why behind every what. But that's not how you're built. Your mind connects dots that don't even know they belong together. It builds meaning out of fragments, stories out of silence. You notice how every joy carries the seed of its ending, how every beginning hums with the echo of loss. You don't mean to find patterns, they just appear, like constellations waiting for your eyes to name them. And once you see them, you can't go back to pretending the sky is empty. This awareness, it isn't something you chose, it's something that chose you. Like a river that carved its way through your thoughts long before you were born. You inherited it, this depth, this seeing, this endless turning of the mind. Some call it a curse, others a gift. Maybe it's both, because to see deeply is to feel deeply, and feeling deeply is both what breaks you and what keeps you alive. There's a quiet beauty in understanding things that others overlook. You see how grief and gratitude can live in the same breath. You notice how a moment of stillness can say more than 1,000 explanations. You understand that the world isn't made of facts but of meanings. Fragile, shifting, human meanings. But that beauty comes at a cost, because the more you understand, the less simple anything becomes. Every truth you find opens another question. Every answer dissolves into something larger, and sometimes you wish you could stop searching, just to rest inside not knowing. But rest doesn't come easily to those who live in thought. Your mind is a tide that never stops pulling. Even when the world sleeps, it wanders. It asks, it imagines, it remembers. And when it tires, it dreams. Not of escape, but of understanding. You realize now that deep thinking isn't about choice or effort. It's an inheritance, a way of being wired into your very soul. You were born with eyes that see beneath the surface, a mind that questions even peace itself. You can't silence it, but maybe you can listen to it more gently. So you begin to make peace with your mind, not by fighting its depth, but by accepting it. You stop asking it to be quiet and start asking it to be kind. You let your thoughts wander like rivers, knowing they'll find their way back to stillness eventually. You learn that awareness doesn't have to mean exhaustion. It can also mean connection. The same mind that overwhelms you is the one that lets you see beauty others miss. The same heart that feels too much is the one that understands love without needing words. You breathe slowly, deeply. You watch light move across your walls and realize that awareness isn't the enemy. Resistance is. What if, instead of wishing to see less, you learned to hold what you see with softer hands? What if your depth wasn't something to fix, but something to honor? Maybe you were never meant to float at the surface. Maybe you were meant to dive, to explore the quiet, unseen worlds below. Because beneath all the noise, there's meaning. Beneath all the thoughts, there's peace. You start to sense it, not as silence, but as clarity. The kind of stillness that comes when you stop fighting the depth of your own perception. You don't have to escape your mind to find peace. You just have to stop fearing its depth. And in that quiet realization, something shifts. The world doesn't feel as heavy. The patterns don't feel like chains. They feel like art. Every thought, every memory, every question becomes a part of something larger. Something beautiful. Something alive. You finally see it. Not everything you think is meant to be solved. Some things are just meant to be seen. You were never cursed to think too much. You were gifted the eyes to see what others miss. The pain that hides in laughter. The hope that hides in sorrow. The truth that hides in every small passing moment. You carry this awareness not because you must, but because the world needs someone who can see it this way. Someone who reminds it that depth still matters. And as you look out into the soft, trembling light of morning, you feel a quiet acceptance settling in. The weight is still there. But now it feels like gravity, not burden. It keeps you grounded, connected, awake. You finally understand. You don't have to see less to find peace. You just have to love what you see. But the more you see, the harder it becomes to belong. You stop being lonely for people and start being lonely in the crowd. It's a quiet kind of ache. Not sharp, not loud, just this steady hum inside you that no one else seems to hear. You walk through rooms full of voices, laughter, energy, and still feel like a ghost wandering through a world made of glass. You're there, but not quite in it. People talk, but you feel their words slide across the surface of things, never quite reaching what matters. It's not solitude that hurts. It's being unseen. I used to think I was broken. I thought something was wrong with me, because I didn't fit into the rhythm everyone else seemed to follow. I'd watch people find connection so easily. Laughter, shared jokes, fleeting friendships. And I'd wonder how they made it look so effortless. For me, connection always felt like swimming against the current. I didn't want attention. I wanted presence. I didn't want company. I wanted understanding. But that kind of depth scares most people. It asks for more than they're ready to give. There's a certain loneliness that comes with seeing too much. When you notice the cracks in people's smiles, when you feel the exhaustion hidden behind their enthusiasm, it becomes hard to pretend. You start craving conversations that don't dissolve into small talk. You want to speak about the things that live beneath the surface. Why we're here, what we fear, how love both saves and destroys us. But the world rarely listens for that kind of depth. It rewards noise, not nuance. So you learn to go quiet, not out of pride, but protection. You stop explaining yourself because you're tired of translating your thoughts into a language others don't understand. You nod, you smile, you play along, but inside you're somewhere else. Walking through the landscapes of your own mind, you start to realize that being around people can make you feel lonelier than being alone, because being unseen in company feels colder than any silence. I remember sitting at a table once, surrounded by laughter, watching faces lit up by conversation. My body was there, but my soul felt distant. As if pressed against an invisible wall, I looked at them and wondered, if I disappeared right now, how long until they noticed? It wasn't self-pity, just clarity. The realization that presence doesn't always mean connection. That being invited doesn't always mean being understood. There's a kind of grief in realizing you no longer belong to the world the way you used to. The things that once excited you now feel hollow. The conversations you used to enjoy now feel rehearsed. You begin to crave silence like oxygen. And when you finally get it, you find it's not as empty as people think. Silence has layers. It listens. It holds you. It speaks truths that words can't carry. Still, there are nights when the ache returns. When you scroll through faces and voices that feel both familiar and unreachable. You tell yourself you're fine. That solitude is your sanctuary now. But then you catch yourself longing for something simple. Someone who just gets it without needing you to explain. Not because you need saving, but because you want to rest. To stop performing understanding and simply be understood. I used to think I was antisocial, but I've realized now I'm not avoiding people. I'm avoiding pretense. I'm drawn to authenticity the way some are drawn to warmth. I want to sit with someone who isn't afraid of silence, who doesn't fill every pause with noise. Someone who listens with their eyes, not just their ears. Someone who doesn't shrink away when the conversation turns toward what hurts, what heals, what's real. The irony is, deep thinkers love deeply, but they love through awareness, through noticing, remembering, holding space. They see the small things, the way someone avoids their reflection, the way a voice trembles before the truth. They fall in love not with faces, but with minds, with patterns of thought, with the way someone feels about life. But that kind of love rarely finds its mirror, because in a world built for speed, depth can feel like a burden. So you grow comfortable in your own company. You learn to enjoy the quiet rituals, the soft morning light, the sound of your own breathing, the way time stretches when no one's around to fill it. At first, the silence feels heavy. Then it begins to feel like home. You start to understand that solitude isn't loneliness. It's self-communion. It's the moment your thoughts stop screaming for attention, and start whispering truths instead. There's beauty in walking alone. You begin to see the world more clearly when no one is trying to explain it for you. You notice how trees bend toward the wind without complaint, how the moon shines for no one in particular, how the world keeps moving whether anyone's watching or not. You start to see that your solitude isn't emptiness. It's space. Space for thought, for feeling, for simply being. But there's still a softness in your longing. You don't stop wishing for connection. You just stop forcing it. You stop chasing people who only want fragments of you. You stop explaining your depth to those who only came for the surface. You begin to trust that the ones meant for you will recognize your silence as something familiar, not foreign. They'll see your stillness and feel safe there. You surrender, not to loneliness, but to truth. The truth that not everyone will meet you where you are, that most people don't want to dive that deep. And that's okay, because your depth isn't a flaw to be hidden. It's a landscape to be explored. You realize that being misunderstood doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're rare. It means you've been looking for mirrors in a world full of windows. Slowly, you begin to find beauty in your own company. The ache of loneliness softens into the hum of peace. You begin to enjoy the quiet mornings, the late-night thoughts, the long walks without conversation. You start to understand that solitude isn't something to survive. It's something to honor, because in the stillness, you finally meet the parts of yourself that the world was too loud to hear. The loneliness doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It becomes less of a wound and more of a witness. A gentle reminder that your need for connection comes from a beautiful place. It means you care. It means you feel. It means you're still open, still alive. So you stop fighting it. You let the loneliness sit beside you like an old friend. You pour it tea. You listen to what it's been trying to say all along, that what you've been looking for isn't outside of you. It's the peace that comes when you stop needing to be understood by everyone, and instead start understanding yourself. The world keeps spinning, and you keep watching, calm, aware, untouched by the noise. You no longer fear your solitude. You wear it like soft armor, invisible but powerful, because the moment you stopped running from being alone was the moment you realized you were never truly lonely. You were simply waiting to meet yourself. And as that realization sinks in, the silence doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels alive. It feels sacred. The beauty of solitude begins to outweigh the ache of loneliness. You finally see it. Being alone was never the punishment. It was the path back home. But with silence comes another storm. The endless loop of thought. Your thoughts don't rest. They orbit you like moons around a sleepless planet. No matter how quiet the room becomes, the noise inside you never fades. It hums beneath everything, a constant background vibration of questions, possibilities, and half-formed answers that refuse to settle. You don't think because you want to. You think because you can't stop. Even peace feels like a task, another problem to be solved. And the harder you try to escape your mind, the deeper you sink into it. Sometimes you lie awake at night, not out of worry, but out of awareness. You replay moments, words, gestures, not because they matter anymore, but because they might. Your mind searches for meaning in everything, in the tone of a voice, in the pause before a text reply, in the silence after a goodbye. You trace patterns that others never notice. It's as if the world speaks a secret language only you can hear. And that gift, once beautiful, now keeps you from sleeping. I wish I could stop understanding everything. You whisper into the dark. But understanding has become your survival. It's how you make sense of chaos, how you turn confusion into something you can hold. The mind believes that if it just keeps thinking, it can control what it fears. If it keeps dissecting, it won't get hurt. But control is the cruelest illusion, the one that keeps you awake while the world rests. You remember a time when thought felt like wonder, when you used to get lost in questions not out of fear, but fascination. Back then, curiosity was your light. You'd gaze at the stars, lose yourself in books, wander through your own imagination like it was a landscape. But something changed along the way. The light turned harsh. The questions became heavier. Instead of opening you, they began to close you in. You stopped exploring ideas and started interrogating yourself. The gift of insight became the curse of overanalysis. Every emotion, every memory, every decision had to be examined, dissected, understood. Your mind became both the doctor and the wound, trying endlessly to fix itself with the same tools that caused the pain. You overthink because you care, but care too much, and thought becomes a cage. You confuse awareness with safety, and so you stay awake, scanning for answers that never come. It's strange how awareness, the very thing that frees others, can imprison you. You can't unsee what you've seen. The motives behind words, the patterns in relationships, the hidden threads of behavior that weave through people's choices. You see how everyone is trying to protect themselves, how love and fear are often the same thing in disguise. You see it all, and yet that clarity doesn't bring peace. It brings fatigue, because when you see everything, you also see how little control you have. Peace feels foreign to a mind built for depth. Stillness feels like danger, because silence invites thoughts to speak louder. You want to rest, but rest requires trust. Trust that the world won't collapse if you stop thinking about it. And that's the hardest part. To stop thinking feels like surrender. To let go feels like carelessness. You've built your safety out of analysis, and without it, you fear you'll fall apart. There's a quiet sadness in realizing that your own brilliance can exhaust you. That the same mind capable of beauty and understanding can also trap you in endless repetition. You start noticing the cycle. Thought creates worry. Worry demands thought. You become the observer of your own mental storm, watching thoughts crash like waves, one after another, until you no longer know which ones are true and which ones are fear. One day, you catch yourself mid-thought, spiraling, unraveling, explaining, and in that instant, something strange happens. You see the mind doing it. You don't become the thought. You witness it. For a moment, you are the sky, and your thoughts are just weather passing through. And that tiny distance changes everything. You realize that thinking isn't the problem. Attachment is. You've been mistaking analysis for control, when really it's fear wearing intelligence as armor. Overthinking is not awareness. It's resistance. It's the mind's refusal to sit in uncertainty. The irony is, the more you think, the more you try to find answers, the further you drift from peace. Because thought feeds itself endlessly. It's like trying to calm the ocean by stirring it. Real calm doesn't come from understanding. It comes from allowing. There comes a night when even your thoughts grow tired. When your mind, usually sharp and restless, feels dull at the edges, too weary to argue with itself. You sit in the half-light, and instead of thinking your way out of the noise, you simply let it be there. You don't fight the spiral. You don't chase clarity. You let the questions hang unanswered. And in that quiet surrender, something opens. For the first time in a long time, You feel space. Not silence, space. The thoughts are still there, but they're lighter now, less urgent. They move through you like wind through open hands. You realize that stillness doesn't mean the absence of thought. It means the absence of control. It's the gentle acceptance that the mind will move the way the ocean moves. Sometimes calm, sometimes wild, and both are natural. You close your eyes and breathe. The mind still whispers, but now it feels less like an enemy and more like a child. Scared, curious, in need of comfort. You stop trying to quiet it, and instead you listen. You listen without judgment, without fixing, without naming. You just let it speak, and slowly something shifts. The thoughts begin to soften. The edges blur. The need to understand fades into a quiet knowing. Not everything must be understood to be at peace. You realize then that stillness isn't something to reach. It's something that's been waiting for you. Beneath the noise, beneath the patterns, beneath the endless mental spinning. It's the silence that's always been there, unnoticed, because your thoughts were too loud to hear it. For years, you tried to conquer your mind, to discipline it, to outthink it. But now you see the mind isn't something to conquer. It's something to befriend. Its chaos is only fear, its noise only longing. It doesn't need control, it needs compassion. You don't silence it through force. You calm it through love. You start to see overthinking for what it really is. A form of self-protection. The mind thinks endlessly because it's afraid. Afraid to feel, afraid to trust, afraid to not know. Every loop of thought is a desperate attempt to create safety in a world that feels unpredictable. But true safety doesn't come from thinking. It comes from presence, from breathing through the storm instead of analyzing it. So you stop fighting, you stop fixing. You sit, you breathe, you let the mind do what it does. And somehow, in that surrender, a strange peace begins to emerge. Not because the thoughts are gone, but because you no longer believe them all. You start to notice the space between them, the pauses where awareness lives. The mind still moves, but now it dances instead of fights. The waves still crash, but they no longer drown you. You begin to trust the rhythm, to let it flow through you instead of against you. You realize that peace was never the absence of thought. It was the acceptance of its movement. And as you sit there, the noise begins to fade into a soft hum, almost musical, almost kind. You open your eyes to a world that feels different. Not quieter, but gentler. The thoughts are still orbiting, but they no longer own you. You've become the still point around which they move. That night, you finally sleep. Not because your mind is empty, but because it's free. And somewhere in that fragile peace, a truth takes root. The mind was never your enemy. It was your mirror, showing you what you refused to feel. And once you stopped running from it, it stopped chasing you. But the more you think, the more truth you uncover. About pain, love, and yourself. You feel it before you understand it. The tremor of someone else's sadness. The quiet ache that doesn't belong to you, but somehow settles in your chest. To think deeply is to feel deeply. And that's what breaks most people. Most run from emotion as if it were fire. But you walk into it. You stand there open, absorbing everything like rain that never really dries. You've been told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. But what they don't see is that sensitivity is not weakness. It's awareness. It's seeing what others refuse to look at, feeling what they numb themselves to escape. You've always been a mirror. people look into you and find themselves. Sometimes beautifully, sometimes painfully. You reflect their truths back to them, often before they're ready to see them. And that's why they pull away. Not because you're wrong, but because you're clear. You hold up a kind of emotional honesty that the world isn't built to face, and you've paid the price for it. In silence, confusion, and exhaustion. There are nights when your own heart feels too crowded. Too many emotions that aren't yours. Too many echoes of pain you can't name. You lie awake, feeling waves that no one else feels. You try to rationalize it. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's empathy, maybe it's both. But deep down, you know it's something else. You were born with a mind that doesn't just think, but feels its thoughts. Each idea has a pulse, each memory a heartbeat. You used to think something was wrong with you, that normal people didn't feel this much, that they could walk through chaos untouched while you absorbed it all. You envied their distance, their ability to stay dry while you drowned in invisible waters. But with time, you began to see the truth. Feeling deeply isn't a defect. It's a kind of intelligence, one that speaks the language of emotion before reason even begins. There's a moment that comes to every empath, though, when the world's pain becomes too heavy to carry. You start to pull back, not out of coldness, but survival. You stop picking up every broken piece you see. You stop rescuing every sinking soul, because you realize empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Feeling everything is noble, but healing everything isn't your job. I feel what others refuse to feel. You whisper, almost like a confession. It sounds both proud and tired, because to feel this way is to live on the edge of joy and sorrow at once. You see beauty everywhere, but also the suffering beneath it. A sunset makes you ache because it's fleeting. A smile makes you wonder what pain it's hiding. You love intensely because you know how easily love fades. You understand people so deeply that sometimes it hurts to look at them. There was a time when you thought emotion and thought were enemies, that logic could save you from feeling too much. You tried to think your way out of pain. You analyzed, categorized, built neat little theories around your wounds. But feelings are not problems to solve. They are tides to be understood. And slowly, painfully, you began to realize that your emotions were not chaos. They were mirrors, each one showing you something your mind hadn't yet accepted. Grief mirrored attachment. Anger mirrored boundaries. Love mirrored longing. Every emotion was a reflection, not a flaw. The more you resisted them, the more they grew distorted. But the moment you stopped fighting, they softened. You learned that emotions don't destroy you. Suppression does. Over time, you started to notice a strange shift. The same emotions that once drowned you now became guides. Sadness didn't scare you anymore. It invited you inward. Fear didn't paralyze you. It taught you where you still lacked trust. Even loneliness became a teacher, showing you that connection begins with yourself. What once felt like a curse was, in truth, a curriculum of the soul. There's a certain grace that comes with emotional maturity, not the absence of pain, but the ability to sit with it. You no longer rush to fix every discomfort or interpret every feeling. You simply allow. You breathe. You let it move through you like weather through sky. And in that stillness, something beautiful happens. You start to hear your true self again, not the self molded by others' expectations or their unhealed wounds, but the quiet, patient voice that has been waiting beneath all the noise. You realize that emotion is not weakness. It's awareness. It's what connects you to the pulse of existence. It's the language through which life speaks. When you feel deeply, you're not falling apart. You're tuning in. You're experiencing reality in high definition, while others only see the outlines. And though it's exhausting at times, there's also wonder in it. You can find poetry in heartbreak, music in silence, tenderness in pain. You start to see that your empathy is both a bridge and a boundary. It connects you, but it also reminds you to return to yourself. You learn to feel without absorbing, to care without collapsing. The more you understand your emotions, the more you understand the world, because everyone is just expressing what they cannot yet say. Anger hides grief, silence hides fear, laughter hides longing, and once you see that, compassion becomes your default state. Not pity, not sympathy, but a quiet knowing that everyone is fighting a battle you can't see. And in that knowing, you find peace, not because the world stops hurting, but because you no longer resist the truth of it. You've stopped demanding that life be easier, or people be softer, or feelings be lighter. You've accepted that depth will always be your nature, that you were made to feel, to see through layers, to hold emotion until it reveals its meaning. Now, when tears come, you don't ask them to leave. You sit with them, trace their story, thank them for visiting. When joy arrives, you don't cling to it. You let it breathe. Every feeling has its own rhythm, and you've learned to dance with all of them. You walk differently now, quieter, steadier. You're no longer afraid of your heart. You know that emotion isn't a flood to fear, but an ocean to explore. The same depth that once overwhelmed you now grounds you. You're not drowning anymore. You're learning to float, and somewhere deep inside you understand. The mind and the heart were never meant to be enemies. They are mirrors, reflecting different sides of the same truth. The intellect sees form. Emotion feels essence. One without the other is blindness. Together, they make vision. You smile softly, maybe even laugh a little because you finally see it. This sensitivity you once tried to hide, it was never a flaw. It was your first form of wisdom. The world may never fully understand it, but you don't need it to. You've made peace with your depth. And in that peace, you realize something even greater. The more deeply you feel, the more deeply you live. Emotion doesn't make life heavier. It makes it real. But seeing life this deeply also means questioning it endlessly. Deep thinkers don't just ask what life is. They ask why it exists at all. It starts as curiosity, but soon, curiosity becomes a storm. You begin to look beyond faces and moments and objects into the space behind them. The invisible pulse that keeps everything moving. You stare at the sky and realize it doesn't answer back. You feel the wind and wonder if it remembers you. You sense something vast and ancient beneath all of this. Yet you can't touch it, can't name it, can't prove it. And so, the questions begin to eat you alive. Most people swim on the surface of existence, content with names and roles, satisfied with the illusion of purpose that comes with motion. But for the deep thinker, the surface is too thin. You can't pretend not to see through it. You can't stop asking, what's beneath all this? Awareness turns to wonder, and wonder turns to despair. Because the more you see, the more you realize how much is unknowable. It's not that you've lost faith. It's that you've lost the ability to lie to yourself. The stories that once made you feel safe, religion, romance, success, morality, they begin to unravel, thread by thread. You start to see them not as truths, but as frameworks, constructs, beautiful, fragile attempts to make sense of chaos. And that realization, that the meaning you seek might not exist, waiting somewhere out there. It breaks something open inside you. If nothing matters, you whisper, why does it all hurt so much? The question echoes like thunder in an empty field. You feel both small and infinite at once. Meaning becomes both salvation and torture. You crave it like oxygen, yet every attempt to define it feels hollow. The more you reach for certainty, the further it slips away. Days begin to feel strange. Ordinary moments, brushing your teeth, hearing a song, passing strangers, suddenly shimmer with surreal weight. You feel like an actor who's woken up mid-play and realized the stage isn't real. You look at your hands, your face, your memories, and wonder, who am I? And beneath that question, a quieter one whispers, was I ever? Existential awareness is not gentle. It strips you bare. It dissolves every illusion until all that's left is the raw pulse of being. You start to feel the absurdity of everything. How we chase dreams that fade, love people who die, build empires that turn to dust. And yet, even as you see through it all, something in you refuses to stop caring. That's the strange part. You know it's all temporary, but you still feel the ache of beauty, the pull of hope. You still cry when the sun sets. You still want to hold someone's hand in the dark. This is the paradox of awareness. To see the futility of meaning and yet still yearn for it. You begin to understand what philosophers meant when they said that consciousness is both a gift and a wound. You can't return to ignorance, but you also can't live forever in this void. The mind demands an anchor. So you search. You dive into books, beliefs, philosophies, art. Anything that might explain the ache. You find Jung's words about the soul's hunger for wholeness, Nietzsche's laughter at the abyss, Camus's rebellion against absurdity. They speak your language, but none of them save you, because truth, as you soon realize, cannot be borrowed. It must be built. There comes a breaking point, the existential storm itself. It doesn't arrive with thunder or rage, but with silence, a still cold clarity. You wake up one day and the world feels empty of color, not dead but hollow. You can see life happening around you, people laughing, loving, striving, but it all feels distant, like you're watching it through glass. You start to question whether you've gone too far, whether your mind has crossed a threshold it can't return from. You crave simplicity, to believe again, to feel again, to be moved by small things without dissecting them. But your awareness won't let you. Once you've seen through illusion, you can't unsee it. So you stand in the middle of it all, the meaningless and the miraculous, wondering if there's a way to live between them. And then something subtle shifts, not through effort but through exhaustion. You stop fighting for answers. You stop trying to solve existence like a riddle. You simply breathe, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. You realize that the mind's hunger for meaning is endless. But peace isn't found in feeding it. It's found in silence. Meaning isn't waiting in the sky or hidden in some divine text. It isn't handed down. It's created, moment by moment, choice by choice. You see that the universe doesn't owe you purpose, but it gave you awareness. And with that comes the power to weave purpose into the fabric of your own life. You understand now that the question, why do we exist, may never be answered. And that's okay, because maybe the real beauty lies in the asking itself, in the dance between wonder and uncertainty. The point was never to find meaning, but to feel it, to live it. You start noticing small miracles again, the way light bends through leaves, the quiet rhythm of your breath, The way music touches something in you that words can't reach. These aren't proofs of meaning. They are meaning. They're fragments of eternity showing through the cracks. You begin to live differently, not because you've solved the mystery, but because you've stopped needing to. You no longer chase certainty. You learn to walk with doubt as a companion. The storm hasn't vanished. It's become the sea you sail upon. Sometimes the questions still return. Sometimes the emptiness still calls your name. But now, instead of drowning in it, you listen. You let it speak, and you realize the void isn't trying to destroy you. It's inviting you to expand, to grow beyond the edges of who you thought you were. You smile, faintly, because you finally see it. Existence doesn't need to justify itself. The fact that you are aware, breathing, feeling, that's miracle enough. You don't need to know why the universe exists to be grateful that it does. You begin to find peace in mystery. You stop demanding answers from the infinite and start listening to its silence. And in that silence, something sacred stirs. Not knowledge, but acceptance. The kind of acceptance that feels like coming home to something nameless, yet familiar. The mind relaxes. The heart softens. The questions remain, but they no longer haunt you. You realize that meaning was never lost. It was always waiting for you to stop searching long enough to see it. And when meaning returns, so does something even rarer. Gratitude. You stop seeking peace as an escape. You begin to see it as a state of being. There was a time when you chased it like a destination. Something you could reach if only you tried hard enough, read enough, healed enough, understood enough. But peace, you realize now, doesn't wait on the far side of effort. It lives quietly beneath it. Like a calm ocean under crashing waves, it's always been there, waiting for you to stop fighting the water. You sit still for the first time in a long time. Not to meditate, not to fix, not to transcend, just to be. And in that simple being, something shifts. The noise doesn't vanish, but it loses its grip. The mind quiets not because it's empty, but because it's full of acceptance. You don't silence the world. You stop arguing with it. The thoughts still come, the emotions still rise, but you no longer chase or resist them. You let them pass like weather across an endless sky. For years, you mistook stillness for absence. You feared that if you stopped thinking, you'd disappear. But stillness is not absence, it's presence. It's not the death of thought, but the space around it. The moment between inhale and exhale. The silence beneath every sound. You start to notice it in small things. The pause before rain touches the earth. The quiet hum of the night. The warmth of sunlight on your skin. Life was never loud. Your mind just was. I used to chase calm, you whisper. Now I breathe it. The words aren't profound. They're true. You see how often you ran from the moment, mistaking movement for meaning. How often you filled silence with noise, fear with distraction, depth with doing. But the moment you stop running, peace greets you like an old friend who never left, just waited patiently at the door. Relief doesn't come as fireworks. It arrives as softness. You begin to feel a gentle gratitude for nothing in particular, just for existing. You no longer demand that the moment be extraordinary. The ordinary has become holy. The act of being as breathing, seeing, sitting becomes enough. And in that enoughness, you finally rest. It's strange. You used to think peace would feel like control, like perfect order. But instead, it feels like surrender. You stop needing life to make sense. You stop trying to hold the river still. You learn that serenity is not the absence of movement, but the acceptance of flow. You no longer stand outside the current, analyzing it. You become part of it. You begin to see how the mind once mistook awareness for anxiety. The same sensitivity that once caused pain now becomes a doorway into presence. You feel more, but you suffer less. You see more, but you judge less. You think deeply, but not endlessly. Awareness no longer feels like a burden. It feels like belonging. There's a beauty in this stillness that words can't quite hold. It's not dramatic or ecstatic. It's gentle and constant, like a candle that doesn't fight the darkness. It simply glows. You realize peace was never hiding in silence. It was hidden in permission. The moment you allowed life to be what it is, the moment you allowed yourself to be as you are, the war ended. The body begins to trust again. The breath slows. The heart softens. Every moment becomes both teacher and mirror. You see how everything, even chaos, moves in rhythm. Even pain, when not resisted, begins to flow toward understanding. The universe isn't against you. It's speaking in ways you're finally quiet enough to hear. You think of all the years spent searching, and a small smile finds your face. You searched for peace as though it were lost, as though it lived somewhere else. But peace was never lost. You were just too loud to hear it, too busy surviving to notice it breathing beside you. And now, sitting in stillness, you feel something deeper than calm. You feel connection to yourself, to existence, to everything unseen but somehow known. It's not the kind of connection that binds. It's the kind that frees. You realize that you don't have to hold on to life. You just have to let it hold you. Moments pass. Thoughts flicker. The world continues unchanged. But you're no longer separate from it. You move slowly, deliberately, without the panic of needing to arrive anywhere. Even your thoughts seem gentler now. They approach like waves that rise and fall without trying to crash. You begin to see that this is what awareness was always leading you toward. Not understanding the world, but resting within it. Not solving the mystery, but becoming part of it. You find that your deepest insights no longer come from thought, but from stillness, from the quiet hum of being itself. Gratitude fills you without reason. You realize that peace was never a reward for solving life. It's the natural state of seeing life as it is. Everything you chased, love, meaning, clarity, was waiting beneath the noise of wanting. And now that you've stopped searching, it all comes to you in silence. You breathe deeply, eyes open to the ordinary miracle of existence. A tree swaying, a cloud drifting, the heartbeat echoing in your chest. Nothing grand, nothing spectacular. Yet everything feels sacred. The world hasn't changed, but the way you see it has. You no longer strive to be still. You simply are, and that is the greatest peace of all. When stillness is no longer an act, but your nature, the mind remains capable, but it no longer dominates. The heart remains open, but it no longer breaks. The soul at last feels at home in the mystery. In this stillness, you discover something even deeper than peace. Clarity, not the kind that comes from answers, but the kind that comes from vision. A knowing that doesn't need words, a strength that doesn't need proof. You understand now. To be still is not to withdraw from life, but to return to it fully. And in this peace, a new kind of strength is born. Clarity. When your mind clears, life stops being something to figure out and starts being something to feel. The noise that once filled your head fades, not because the world has gone quiet, but because you no longer mistake its echo for truth. For the first time, you can see without trying to interpret, feel without trying to fix, breathe without trying to control. Everything slows down, and what's left is something ancient. Awareness, pure and unforced, like sunlight finding its way through fog. You realize that clarity isn't control, it's communion. It's not about mastering life, but moving in rhythm with it. You used to think that understanding meant having the right answers. Now you see that understanding means having no resistance. The mind that once dissected everything now bows in reverence to what simply is. You see that wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers through silence. There's a moment, almost imperceptible, where you stop searching. You don't even notice when it happens. One day, you just realize the questions have softened. The ache to know, to grasp, to define has dissolved into quiet wonder. I don't need to understand anymore, you whisper to no one in particular. I just need to see. And seeing becomes enough. Clarity doesn't arrive like lightning. It comes like dawn, slowly, tenderly, revealing what was always there. You notice how everything has a place. The joy, the sorrow, the chaos, the stillness. Even confusion, in hindsight, was part of the order. What once felt like random pain now looks like necessary unfolding. What once felt like loss now feels like space being made for something new. You begin to sense how intelligence was never meant to separate you from life. It was meant to bring you deeper into it. You stop thinking of your thoughts as obstacles. They're just waves, part of the same sea. You no longer fight to quiet them. You listen to their rhythm, their coming and going. The clarity isn't in their absence, but in your relationship to them. It's strange how light feels after so much shadow. You spent so long trying to escape darkness that you forgot. Darkness was only the absence of sight. Now, every shadow feels like a teacher, every emotion like a messenger. The overthinking that once fractured you has become integration. You see now that your depth was never chaos. It was signal. Life asking to be witnessed more closely. You find yourself watching simple things. The way light moves through a window. The sound of footsteps in the distance. The pulse in your wrist. Each detail becomes a form of prayer. You realize clarity isn't found through thought. It is thought that has stopped searching. The mind finally bows to the heart. You remember how it felt to live in confusion. The spinning, the analysis, the need to label every feeling. You smile softly at that memory, not with regret, but compassion. You understand now that confusion was part of the cleansing. It stripped away certainty so that truth could breathe. This is where intelligence transforms into wisdom. The mind still sees, still analyzes, still questions. But now it does so with humility. There's no longer a war between logic and emotion, between thought and feeling. They've merged like two rivers meeting at the ocean. You realize clarity is not the absence of thought. It's thought illuminated by awareness. The world looks the same, but feels entirely new. The people who once irritated you now appear as reflections of your own journey, fragments of yourself, each seeking peace in their own way. The events that once broke you now appear as milestones in your evolution. You see life not as happening to you, but through you. There's a lightness in your step. You no longer carry the need to prove, to fix, to know. You move like someone who trusts the unfolding. You've learned that not everything requires your mind. Some things just require your presence. Clarity reveals a deeper truth. Wisdom was never hidden in books or theories. It was always in experience, in heartbreak, in silence, in surrender. Every moment you thought was meaningless was shaping you into someone who could finally see. You remember the words of the wise, that awareness is not about escaping thought, but seeing through it. You realize you don't need to transcend being human. You just need to be fully human. The soul doesn't awaken by leaving the mind. It awakens by loving it back into wholeness. And then comes the most beautiful realization. The deep thinker's reward is not knowledge, but wisdom. Not clarity of thought, but clarity of being. You no longer define yourself by intellect or depth. You define yourself by presence. You see that true intelligence is not found in complexity, but in simplicity. In being so awake that even breathing feels profound. There's peace now, but it's not the fragile peace of avoidance. It's the living peace of acceptance. You don't have to control your emotions. You trust their movement. You don't have to chase meaning. You feel it flowing through everything. It's a strange freedom to no longer need to understand, yet to feel deeply connected to all that exists. You find yourself laughing more easily, forgiving more quickly, loving more gently. You've stopped trying to become the person who knows and started becoming the person who sees. You finally understand what it means to think clearly, not to separate yourself from life, but to participate in it consciously. Thought has become a dance instead of a struggle. Awareness is no longer an effort. It's your natural state. In this space, even silence speaks. It tells you that you've arrived, not somewhere new, but somewhere true. You look at the world, at yourself, at everything you once questioned, and realize that it was never about finding clarity out there. It was always about clearing the fog within, and that's when you realize depth was never a burden. It was your light. Being a deep thinker was never about knowing more. It was about seeing more. For most of my life, I thought my depth was a flaw. I mistook reflection for overthinking, empathy for weakness, silence for loneliness. I thought too much, felt too much, noticed too much. And the world told me that too much was something to hide. But now, standing at the quiet edge of my becoming, I see it differently. Maybe I was never too much. Maybe I was just tuned to truth. There's a moment in every soul's journey when self-judgment turns into self-recognition. You stop apologizing for your depth because you finally see that it wasn't heaviness. It was sensitivity. And sensitivity, when honored, becomes light. The same depth that once felt like a burden begins to glow from within. I used to think I was drowning in my thoughts. Now I see I was swimming toward myself. For years, I chased simplicity, not realizing that real simplicity comes after complexity, not before it. You can't arrive at peace without passing through your own storms. And every storm I ever went through was just depth, trying to teach me how to see clearly. There was a time I wished to be like others, lighter, quieter inside, untouched by the weight of meaning. But I've learned that what I carry is not heaviness, it's awareness. My mind doesn't wander aimlessly, it listens. My heart doesn't break easily, it opens deeply. What I once called overthinking was actually overfeeling. The soul's way of reading between the lines of life. Maybe I was never overthinking. I whisper now, almost smiling. Maybe I was just seeing clearly. Depth has a strange way of isolating you, until it doesn't. In the beginning, it separates you from the surface world. You start noticing what others overlook. the sadness behind a smile, the silence between words, the truth behind patterns. It can feel lonely, like standing on the edge of understanding something others don't want to see. But with time, that loneliness transforms. You realize that depth was never meant to make you distant. It was meant to make you aware. You begin to feel connection in places you never noticed before. In nature, in silence, in small gestures, you start seeing the divine in the ordinary. And suddenly, you belong everywhere. It's a quiet kind of belonging, not the kind that needs to be seen or validated, but the kind that simply is. You stop needing others to understand you, because you finally understand yourself. Depth was never darkness. It was light that reached further. I used to be afraid of my own mind, of how deeply it could travel into questions, how easily it could dissolve boundaries. But now I see that depth wasn't taking me away from life. It was guiding me closer to its essence. Like a diver sinking beneath the noise to find the stillness of the sea floor, I was meant to go deeper so that I could rise clearer. And the most beautiful part, the light was never above. It was always beneath. When you live deeply, you start noticing how everything is connected. Joy and pain, loss and growth, silence and song. You can't have one without the other. The mind that once labeled these opposites as good or bad now sees them as different expressions of the same truth. Depth teaches you to hold paradoxes, to be grounded yet free, certain yet open, human yet infinite. You begin to love complexity, not as confusion, but as creation, life folding itself in intricate patterns of meaning. There's peace in that realization, not the peace of escape, but the peace of acceptance. For a long time, I thought healing meant becoming less emotional, less intense, less deep. Now I see that real healing is becoming fully yourself, without defense, without shame. The moment you stop fighting your nature, it transforms from pain into purpose. I no longer resist my depth. I tend it like a garden. I fill it with silence, beauty, and gratitude. I've learned that peace isn't the absence of depth. It's the harmony within it. When I sit alone now, it doesn't feel like solitude. It feels like communion with my thoughts, with existence, with something infinite breathing quietly through everything. Depth used to make me feel misunderstood. Now, it makes me understand, because when you see deeply, you can't help but forgive. You recognize that everyone is doing their best with the awareness they have. You stop demanding perfection from others and from yourself. You start loving in softer ways, without possession, without condition, without fear. This is what happens when thought becomes love. It's strange how life circles back. You start as a seeker, searching for meaning, answers, peace. You end as a witness, realizing it was all within you. The journey wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who you've always been. Now, when I look back, I see that every breakdown was really a breakthrough in disguise. Every silence I sat in wasn't emptiness, it was preparation. Every moment I felt lost was just life redirecting me inward. I was never broken. I was being refined. The light beneath the depth is not something you find one day. It's something that's always been shining through you. You just had to go deep enough to see it. You realize that awareness is not about escaping the world, but embracing it fully. The trees, the sky, the faces around you, they all start to shimmer with quiet significance. you understand what mystics meant when they said that everything is God disguised as ordinary. And when you finally stop trying to understand life, you begin to feel it. You breathe it. You live it without resistance. Depth has taught me that love isn't a feeling. It's a perception. To love deeply is to see deeply, to recognize yourself in everything. The thinker becomes the lover, and the mind that once analyzed becomes the heart that understands. In the end, all the questions fall away. What's left is not knowledge, not even understanding, just awareness. And awareness, when it loves, becomes light. So here I am, no longer afraid of my depth, no longer wishing it away. I walk slower now, breathe softer, listen longer. I let life touch me without armor. Because I know now, the deeper I go, the brighter it becomes. And maybe that's what it always meant to be a deep thinker. Not to live in darkness, but to carry a light that reaches where others haven't yet looked. Depth was never a wound to heal, but a lens to see through. And now that I see clearly, I realize I was never too much. I was simply made to feel the fullness of being alive. The journey inward was never about finding light at the end of the tunnel. It was about discovering that the tunnel itself was made of light. If this spoke to your soul, you're not alone. You were never too sensitive, too emotional, or too deep. You were simply awake in a sleeping world. So take a breath, stay curious, and honor the way you see. Because your depth is needed, your awareness is rare, and your light, though quiet, reaches further than you think. If you felt that truth, share this with someone who feels too much too. Let them know their mind isn't broken. It's brilliant. This is the beauty of thinking deeply. This is your gift.